Hi all, welcome to another episode of the Learning Buzz. This is the 10th episode, right, Cassie? I mean 10 episodes,
This
yeah.
is our 10th episode. I know, crazy, right? 10
Yeah.
episodes already. Oh, goodness. Where did time go?
Time flies. I know. But then it shows that we are having fun also, so yay. So to everybody out there, welcome to this episode. My name is Vishak and I have Cassie, who is the co-host for the Learning Buzz series. We are a webinar and soon to be a podcast series, and we are live on YouTube. We have a very interesting and probably for me, it's one of my happiest episodes, I guess, because I've heard of David for a long time now as part of the L&D. I mean, he's a very, very well-known name in the L&D community. So I'm really happy to have you here, David, as part of this whole session. So,
Hey,
uh,
Vishark, I
yeah.
was a David Kelly fandomanian person. Like every time I would be at Devler, I would be like, hey, David. I'd be like, and then grab a picture, right? And I get his signature picture of him.
Yeah.
It's great. Every photo I have of him. And then I give him my little treats and be like, don't forget me. Don't forget me. So I love it, and as we're getting started here, thank you everyone for joining us. And we just want David to say a little bit about who he is rather than Vishark and I trying to explain, because David has a long history and lots of things going on.
Thank you. I thank you for aging me. No, it's true. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, a little over 20 years actually, if I carbon date the whole thing, and I'm sure things that I share in our discussion will put little timestamps in there as well. But I've been in the industry for a little over 20 years, pretty much two. I'm in the third stage, I would say, of my career. The first stage was largely internally for a couple of different organizations in both finance and nonprofit, in um, leadership roles, for lack of a better term, training director of learning and development, those sorts of roles. And about 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to pivot a little bit, join an organization called the Learning Guild, a professional development community. I started there working on some of the programming around some of the events, but over time took on more of a leadership role. Spent the last part of my tenure there as the CEO and chairman. Left there last year and have since pivoted to more intentional areas of work. I do strategy work with an organization called Bluewater Learning. I do a lot of stuff independently. I advise other companies. I've started building my own environment around amplified learning and performance. So I have a number of different things that I'm doing now as I try to continue the work that I've always done around the passion of supporting the industry and the people who work in it in a more intentional way.
That's so cool. And, for many of you who are on here, his face looks familiar. So definitely, he was the face of DevLearn for like many years. And so people will say, like, where did I see him before? So that's, if you're questioning where, that's probably where you've seen him. And, he has a long history. He's seen a lot of things happen throughout the time of learning. And so, David, we kind of want to go a little bit back in history, because you do, not saying that you were there in the Stone Age when the Flintstones were there. He's a little bit younger than that, right? So we want to kind of talk about, like, what have you seen, because we're in the AI era now, and there's a lot of things that have evolved. Like e-learning popped up, and then this popped up, and this
Mhm.
popped up. And so let's go back. Like, as you remember, way back, what were some of the things that you saw, how it evolved, and how did we get to where we are now?
Sure. So it's going to be difficult to not show my age in this. Not that old, but I mean, I started in this industry as a training director, and even as a training director, like a lot of us who are in roles like that, I didn't just oversee everything. I did a lot of the stuff. So a lot of the stuff that we did when I started as in this industry, and like a lot of people in this industry, I fell into it accidentally. I started my career in finance. I was very good at my job, and people said, "You're good at your job. Go show other people how to do it." and I discovered I was training more often than I was doing the finance work, but I also discovered I loved it and dove into it fully. And at that point, I stopped being a finance professional and started being what now we would call an L&D professional. But I started in an environment when I was in that bank, that first bank that I started doing this work in. Training was in a classroom. That's what it was. I was a facilitator. I existed in this space. And then one day the computers started becoming more ubiquitous in terms of their availability, and we started doing e-learning. And that was a disruption to what we did. I've gone through a lot of technological pivots, and then years later the smartphone emerged, and how are we going to bring that into the portfolio? And we were calling it mobile learning for a while, and we adjusted to that. We've adjusted to tablets and all sorts of different things, that technology that emerged, and just kind of pivoted our methodology. And to your point, now that we're at AI. So what have I learned through all of those iterations? I think that our industry as a whole, while there are great applications of these things, I think our industry as a whole sometimes struggles when a new technology emerges. And I think I'm seeing similar patterns around this with AI. Just in the sense that when a new technology emerges, we tend to look at it through a lens with blinders on. And I mean that in the sense of a new technology emerges and we say, wow, I'll use the first one as an example. Wow, I'm a trainer and I do this classroom thing, and now we got to operate in this space that people are calling e-learning. How do I do what I do in this new technology space? And that's a good question at its surface, but it's a limiting question because it comes with the baggage of what I do. If you look at it that way, it's one of the reasons, if you live through that disruption, it's one of the reasons, in my opinion, that most of the e-learning that was in the early stages and even some of the later stages of e-learning looked like the classroom. Just you took the PowerPoint that was on the screen and you put it on this screen instead, because that's what we do. Same thing with mobile learning when it emerged. We have these new devices that are coming out. How do we take the e-learning and get it there? And we took it and we just made it smaller. Couldn't read it, but it was on the screen. So, I mean, that is, again, how do I do what I do? We took the technology and we just put it in there. I'm seeing similar things with AI right now. Right now, we are, what are people doing with AI? They're generating content more efficiently. They're creating what we do today in a more efficient manner. And that's not where the potential is. The potential is not within our field of view. The potential is taking down the blinders and looking outside our point of view. For me, the greatest potential of AI is not what we're going to do with AI, but what we're going to do at the time that AI saves us. That's where the real potential for L&D around AI is, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that, in the sense where people who are not in the learning space, they look at the tool as the solution, and they forget that the human is still the very important factor and has remained the most important factor throughout the entire journey of learning, right? And we tend to forget that anytime a new innovation comes up, a new technology innovated tool, a new resource, something that is the new hot item, you push the human aside and then we focus on that. And so, one of the things, what's interesting is most of these organizations, they're trying to fiddle around and figure out, how do I do this? While learning professionals, they're in a huge different span of like, I am now learning it to I've been using it for like a long time, and I've been vibe coding, I've been iterating. You have all those names out there like the Jeff Batts and then the Melissa Milliways, and those people who are out there who have been the forefront runners and doing things, and like on Desto, they've been really pushing forward. So now when we look at it, people are saying, okay, the organizations are saying, well, what do we do with this? I mean, are we at a level of maturity to like take this in? Because we were just at this level where we're trying to build learning and we had a stack of learning. Now you throw in a new tool and I'm like, oh, wait, what's happening now? Does that remove me? Does that get rid of me? Do you still need me? Like, there's so many questions that are happening. We hear organizations who are getting rid of jobs and autonomously leveraging that funding funding that they had to improve things, and then they look at their report and go, whoa, that was a lot of tokens we ate up. And that's more than if we had people in the seats. Like, what are some of your thoughts around that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of context attached to that. I don't like to place like black and white issues of this is how it is, this is how it isn't, because it's very contextual to each environment. A lot of people, as you mentioned, will discuss it in the sense of, are these things going to take our jobs away? That's very contextual to the environment. There are and you have to, if you look at the environment that we're in, and I mean this in the workplace environment, you always have those narratives that don't necessarily line up. You've got narratives of companies that say that they're human-centric and we're not going to replace humans, we're going to make them more effective with this. But then you've got the same thing talking in the finance world of, well, we're going to do layoffs and we're going to lay off 4,000 people because we're going to be automating a lot of processes through AI. Those two things don't necessarily line up. I mean, what do I know and what do I believe? I know we're in a capitalistic society, and I know that you could be the most genuinely and authentically human-centric organization. But if you have a fiscal responsibility to shareholders, when things get tight, the easiest way to cut costs is through people. And if you have a technology that will enable you to do that more, make that more possible, that we can still be just as efficient through technology and we don't necessarily need as many people. If you have that fiscal responsibility, I don't care how human-centric you are, you might have to go down that path. So that is the reality. So why do I bring that context into L&D? Because, again, what do we know? We know that these technologies that have emerged are enabling us to do a lot of what we do today more efficiently. We're not unique in L&D, but I think that applies in a lot of different spaces. But I think it carries a little bit more weight in L&D because L&D, whether it's stated or unstated, L&D's value proposition in a lot of organizations, I would argue most organizations, regardless of the language that is used, tends to have a content-centric value proposition. There's a need for performance. We create something to address that need. So if the value proposition that you see yourself through, your organization sees yourself through, is your value is based on the content that you create, and the ability to create that content is more efficient and potentially automated, then there is risk in that paradigm of just if the value that you provide to an organization is based on your ability to create content, and the barrier to entry to do that and the quality is reduced, that other people can do that, there's risk attached to that. I would argue that the opportunity that exists with L&D is to reframe our contribution, to instead of looking at through the lens of content, look at it through the lens of contribution. Look at it through the lens of how can we make an impact. It goes back to what I mentioned earlier, and I'm excited about AI, not because of what AI can do for us, although that does excite me. I think the real opportunity is what new value we can add to our organizations with the time that AI will provide us. And that's not about efficiency. That's about impact. That's about, I mean, I'll put my own personal example on it. I literally, in the early portion of my career, when I was in bank, I would spend probably half of my Friday exporting data from the LMS, massaging it in Microsoft Excel into the format that we needed, so that I could generate the Friday report to send out to the executive so that it was in their mailbox Monday morning so that nobody could read it. And that was the reality. Now I could probably automate that process. The thing that took me half of my day on Friday, that I create a situation where I hit a button and it generates that report for me in the format that I need. And I would have had my entire Friday full. That that would be half of my Friday, that 10% of my week suddenly would have just opened up, that I could have just added new value. All the stuff that was on my list of when we have time, we'll do that. I suddenly could be looking at attacking. and allocating time. So that to me is the possibility that's here if we change our perspective in terms of what our value proposition is.
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do here, right, David? I mean, changing that perspective, it's very important. And I'll give you a couple of things, and that's the whole reason why we are meeting up today.
Yeah.
The whole session is regarding communities, right? Two snippets. One is I've been hearing about companies just getting into AI adoption training programs like left, right, and center. All right.
Yep.
I mean, I know I can name 10 companies right now who are like putting together role-based programs where you start at being a foundation level, and then practitioner, and then you have your champions and whatnot. So when you have a request like that, right? I mean, it's completely content based. They are expecting, the organizations are expecting us to create new content that we have to push on to learners. Where, like Cassie mentioned, some of these learners are way ahead. Like, they probably finished all of this and they're like building stuff, vibe coding, and doing all kinds of really cool stuff. So suddenly enforcing something like this on them is not really, you can't call it, rational in a way. But the other side of it is that you have learners actually learning things on their own. I mean, you see, like right now, what we are doing when you're saying stuff in this podcast and all of this is actually a way to kind of drive that peer-based learning where we worked on something, we learned something, and we are like actually passing it on to the larger community. Somebody out there is going to get it. I may come into office and I may probably say, talk to my peer, and I'll say, hey, you know what? I saw this. I did something in Claude. You want to see it? And be more receptive of that. And that's been happening a lot. So community-based learning is very important. It's happening in an ad hoc way right now. And companies, organizations are not utilizing that, but they are pushing for more content to be created. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, isn't there a gap there somewhere?
There's definitely a gap. I think my starting thought is, why does that paradigm exist? And I think that part of it is legacy. I mean, the reality is everybody who works in vast majority of people who work in an organization have spent 12 plus years of their early life being conditioned on what learning looks like. If I need to learn something, I go to school. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but that's corporate learning in many ways mirrors the environment that we encountered in an academic environment.
Yeah.
And that's people. So when people have a need to learn something, the natural reaction is, I need to take a course. Whether it's the L&D professional or whether it's the executive who is seeing a need within it. And that's why for many in L&D, we're viewed as the content delivery system. I mean, that's kind of the paradigm that we're in. And I don't care what technology you're dealing with. It is work to change that perspective, to break free from that legacy expectation that I think organizations have around training, and to get us to be seen more as performance partners. When you get to be seen as those internal performance consultants, it changes the conversations you have. That's a journey that's not technology specific. That is a journey that you need to go on to change the perspective that stakeholders have about what L&D's role is within an organization, that you have to do that. So putting that in the context of today, I think that we have to change the conversation a little bit. I agree that community aspects can change a lot of what we're talking about here. I don't think it's necessarily either or that one is like that curriculum-based stuff is better than is worse than community, or one is better than the other. I think they have to go hand in hand. I think your formal learning, which I would put all of what we do course-based stuff in that space. It's important. It serves an important role in the organization. It provides a common foundation for people in an employee. It provides shared language for what your organization does. It covers the essential policies, procedures, guardrails that might be in place in your organization. It gives that structure to people who are in your who are working in your organization. Community rests on top of that foundation. Community provides the context around the information that is provided in the formal place. It provides the examples of what that looks like in practice. It provides the space where people can experiment and learn what it feels like to do what you're in there. It provides a feedback mechanism for people. I think that's where, but you still need both. They both operate together in order to really support an organization as you go forward.
David, you the way I see it, you built the guild community, right? And my question to you is, there's probably people on here that are like, okay, I'd love to build a community in my small little influence that I have. How do I start doing that? Because you started and look where it is now. It's like huge.
While I appreciate the compliment, I don't know if I fully agree with it. And it could be because of my perspective on what community is. Community to me is like culture. Like people say, we're going to build a learning culture, or I'm going to build a learning community. And I don't think that that's a true statement, in my opinion, because I think that both of those things exist already. It's just a matter of how vibrant they are, how well supported are they. You could look at the garden that's in someone's backyard that's really, really well run, and you could look at a desert. They both are ecosystems. They both have life in them. It's just a matter of how well supported and how vibrant that is. And I would argue the same thing for community. So for me, and I'll use my experience with the guild as an example. The guild was a platform, or is a platform, where people could share. And so the infrastructure around where people could share exists. So what takes that infrastructure and makes it be a community? And part of it is, does it feel like a community to people? I mean, that's a community isn't something that you have to feel like you're part of a community. That's part of what it is. And for me, it's a matter of, okay, the infrastructure is there, but just because you build it doesn't necessarily mean it's a community, doesn't mean people will come. You have to nurture it in a way that supports the community, that makes it about the community. I mean, one of the main things that I always tried to do in the work that I did was to make it about the people that were there. You mentioned earlier that people might recognize my face because they might have seen me on stage at Devlin. One of the things I always tried to do in those environments is, I don't care what the stage looked like, where the lights were pointing. I wanted the metaphorical spotlight to be on the people that were there. That was the narrative that was there, but it was always about how are you connecting with one another. I mean, the thing that probably typifies it the most, just about every time I ever closed an event, I always said the same thing. And I do this today, even in the small scale stuff that I'm doing today. You're at an event, you're together for a couple of days. You're immersed, you're a sponge, you're taking all the stuff in, the energy, the excitement, it's all there. And then you go back. What happens in the days that you're together in an event doesn't matter at all in comparison to what you do when you leave. And what takes all of that information all the sharing, all the stuff that you were able to absorb, what makes it the rubber hit the road are the people that you take with you, are the people that you can call upon and talk through, and the people that you can share an idea with, the people that you can share a challenge with and put it in context. That's what takes something and makes it feel like a community, where there are people that you connect with around the infrastructure that become part of what helps you apply things, and becomes part of that the people become part of your practice. And there are things that you can intentionally do to help facilitate that. That's one of the areas that I tried to place a lot of focus on, and continue to do. But that's the difference of a community. Community is not about the infrastructure. Community is about how you support the people within it.
And I agree with that. Most of my relationships I've met from those kind of conferences, and then I've extended and built my community, right? And I can send them an email, I can send them a text message, and that makes a huge difference in my career as a learning development professional, because when I get stuck or I need a new idea or I need to think tank something with someone, it's great because you have now a resource out there or connections or relationships that you've built where you can reach out. And I think to your point, community really is about the people and the relationships that we take with us and we carry forward.
Yeah, and the thing that I would also add is I think that there's two sides to it, because you mentioned careers, and I think that that's an important aspect to it. That is two sides to the same coin, and I'll use my own self as an example. On one end, the community has helped me grow my career, literally, as if you're looking at my CV or my LinkedIn. My role with the guild would not have surfaced as a possibility were it not for my engagement in the community. I was active in it. I was sharing in the community. I was connecting with people. I had visibility in that space where people saw what I offered. The leadership of the guild at the time saw the work that I was doing, liked it, and asked me to come join. And every role that I've had since then has come through the network, has come through the community that I engage in. So there is the literal career opportunities that exist there. But what is more important to me, although obviously career growth has meaning to everyone in terms of your ability to support your life, was the growth that's not connected to my CV or my career. The stuff that I've learned by immersing myself in the community, the way that I've grown, the way that I've been able to explore my curiosity and to just immerse myself in this field that I love so much, to just grow in that space. I mean, the reality is, even what we're doing right now, the fact that you know who I am, that you invited me to come here, the fact that we're having this conversation, that there's the reputation or respect that might exist around me, that triggered you to invite me to join you for this podcast, is less around the fact, in my opinion, that I'm a face that people recognized from a stage at an event, and more about the contribution that I like to think that I can have within a community that resonates with people. And that to me is why community is so important. I mean, I mentioned earlier around formal learning that they work together. To me, the formal stuff that we do is critical. It establishes the floor, but it's community and our engagement within it that can raise the ceiling. And that to me is the powerful part of community. It's community that helps each other, that helps us all continue moving forward, continue advancing, continue growing as individuals, as organizations, as a field. That's my opinion. I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, past the formal thing. But thank you so much, David. I mean, that's in a way it's right? I mean, you're right. The foundational training is very important, and it communicates, what that shared language that organization would like their employees to use. That's great, and that community above that is very important. But how do we kind of build that? I mean, what do you have as maybe a few best practices or something that you can share that, and I'm not talking about huge communities, right? I'm talking about within organizations, small groups, 15, 20 people within a team who can come in as a group. And we're talking about AI, upskilling and, learning new things about AI. So how do we kind of drive that? How can we get a team to, become a community?
Sure. So there's a precursor before I answer. The precursor is there is a cultural aspect that cannot be ignored. That's a little separate from the question you're asking. because in order to do the things that I'll share in a second, there needs to be a culture that supports that. For instance, like one of the things that I would say is, because I look at this through the lens of behavior. Like a community to me is one of those categories that we talk about through the lens of things that aren't observable. We talk about it in like what's the traits of a community? What are the characteristics of a community? No, like that's not replicable. That's not a proven practice that other people can follow. Like leadership is an example. Is the book that I'm writing right now is we talk about leadership as someone has integrity. That's not a behavior. What does integrity look like as a behavior? It's kind of the format of the book. So taking that to community, what does community look like as a behavior? What, to your point, what are the things that people can replicate, assuming the culture will support it? Experimentation, creating opportunities for people to experiment. Again, it's got to be safe, because experimenting is great and people say they want these things, but if the experiment doesn't go well and you penalize people for that, then no one will experiment. But giving people the opportunity to experiment is great for community, because people like to talk about what they're experimenting with. They like to find out what they learned. Another reason that anytime you can find an opportunity for people to talk and share with one another, that is going to be an observable behavior that will help boost the community around that. Finding opportunities for people to share the problems that they're encountering with one another. Could be a sharing group. You might need to create like a formal thing around lunches or anything like that, whatever happens to be, where there's just kind of or team meetings or what have you, where you start to model the stuff around what are the problems you're encountering. Anyone else encountered this? How can you do this? And you start building that habit of sharing, creating the safe space to do that. And for me, that works out well, because when you normalize that and people can talk about these things, it's a much better environment to do that than in a simulation in a training room, because it's much closer to the work. It's closer to where people are doing it. It also, if you think about what we do, sometimes I like to create metaphors where it kind of exists within a paradigm that people already see. If you look at the work that the L&D does today, a lot of what we do, metaphorically, is around content distribution.
Right.
We distribute information to people through the work that we do. Community does that too. You can leverage community as a way to distribute the work that people are discovering, the problems that people solve, the challenges that people are doing. It distributes information in a much more efficient way than just a course might do. It's a feat. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just agreeing with you. I mean, I would remember something I saw in a meme on a social media post, like way more importantly than an e-learning course that I sat through. So yeah, I get your picture.
Yeah, I mean, and another area that I'm kind of focused in right now is my mind's going a couple different places. The language that we use, a lot of the behaviors, the observable things that go on in a community, a lot of people would throw the label informal learning on. And it's not an inaccurate label, but I tend to step away from it, just because. I'm sorry?
It has connotations. Yeah.
Well, it does, but it's one of those terms that I think sometimes we use so often that it becomes like a knee-jerk reaction, that we say it so rotely that we don't. It gets stripped of its meaning, that we don't think about what it actually means. We just, it's informal learning, and then we don't think about what that means and the weight that it carries, because we just say it as a response. For me, it's not this community-based, peer-based learning behaviors. It's not about the fact that it's informal to me. The community-based learning has the advantage of proximity, and I mean that in the sense that it's closer to the work. It's closer to the problem that people are encountering. It's closer to the individuals who are experiencing it. It's closer to it has the ability to exist. We talk about this moment, Bob Mosier and Conrad Goffison and many in the industry always talk about trying to address learning in the moment of need. Community enables that. If you have a strong community and you have a problem, you have massive resource through the community to solve that problem. So that's one of the areas, that's probably the biggest reason that I think community matters in the context of learning, is that advantage of proximity, where you have the ability, if you have a strong community, you have the ability to learn and solve problems much closer to, oh wow, I have a problem, let me get in front of a computer and log into the LMS. That's not a criticism of the paradigm of course-based stuff that's in the LMS. I don't hate that. I think I am a believer in the value of the course. I just don't believe that the course should be the default to every performance problem. We should start with whatever the easiest way to solve the problem is, and if you're able to support a community, a lot of times that can be the driver to solve many performance problems that exist within organizations and within the industry.
True, true. This actually leads to another question, and probably I'll route it to one of our discussions that Cassie, you and I had with David in one of our previous calls. Starting a community, great. We can probably suggest it to our, the decision makers, and we can say that. But the organization, does it have the maturity to run a community like that? I mean, that we were talking about maturity towards learning and development in an organization, right? I mean, I think we'll need to touch a little bit on that. I mean, David, Cassie, open to you as well.
Yeah, one of the things, David, you said earlier in your conversation, and we've heard it constantly through many of the webinars that we've had, is build your own table, right? Or like, having a seat at the table, but build your own table, and getting those people to like really start talking. And a lot of people in here, are resonating with you on the community side, where it's a safe place to experiment. You don't have to worry about it, and it motivates each other to experiment. But again, an organization may not be at that level. Like, you may be, and this happens to me all the time because I tend to be the Tasmanian devil. I go into a new organization and I'm like, and then I'm like, oh, okay, wait, the maturity of this organization, I don't think they're ready for me yet.
Yeah.
And yet I can see where they need to be, 10 steps ahead, and they're just at the, what are we doing? So when we talk about maturity for organizations, you talked about a lot of those components from your angle. And I think the work that you're doing at Bluewater, what are you seeing? Like, how is that evolving? How do people like assess their organizations where they are?
Sure. I think that, so the work that I'm doing, obviously we discussed this in some of the previous discussions, plays in this space, because I do find one of the challenges that I have found in our industry is that we tend to look at things a little too binary sometimes. Like you go to a conference and you see something, and it's the perfect state. It's the ideal state. And this is and that's what we shoot for. And that can be really frustrating, because you may not have the resources, you may not have the ability, and to your point, you don't have the maturity to do that. And I don't think that that's a lens that a lot of people have on that. It's, if it's one of the approaches that I always tried to do in the work that I do, whether it's community-based stuff that I did with the guild, whether it's clients that I work with the Bluewater or consulting or advisory, I'm not interested in getting you to the top of the ladder, whatever metaphorical ladder that may be. I want you to go to the next rung in the ladder. I want, I'm more interested, because you're never going to jump from, first off, you can't move up the ladder unless you know what rung you're on. And you're never going to get to the top unless you can unless you can start seeing the path to the next one. So in order to take that journey and to move, because maturity from a learning cultural and learning organization standpoint, it's a spectrum. And there's not right or wrong attached to that. It's another aspect of area that I can be a little frustrated with, is we tend to look at the work that organizations sometimes do as right or wrong, and it's like, no, this is reflective of where they are as a culture. It's one of the things that always frustrated me, in terms of sometimes I would go to an event and I'd hear a speaker and they would talk about, like, this is what your project should look like. And And I had a budget of $6.4 billion to do this, and that's what everybody should be doing. And that's not reality for most people. I mean, you have to work within the constraints that you have for your environment, and the what makes something right for your organization is based on the unique constraints that they're in. So, some of the work that I have been doing is to help bring visibility to that maturity. We at Bluewater have created a series of assessments that help bring visibility to that for an organization, because it's truly my belief that if you understand where you are, then you are better positioned to take the journey to where you want to go. And the assessments are designed to bring visibility to where you are, where the strengths and weaknesses are to your organization, and then from there you can have a conversation of, okay, this is where things are today. What's the best path for us to get to the next step in our journey of our vision of where we go? The vision is pointing you in the direction of where your journey should be. I haven't. It's one of the things I'm trying. Some of the work that I'm doing independently is trying to solve for, is just providing people with the opportunity to build their roadmaps around that. So we do a lot of that work in Bluewater. It's part of the strategy and transformation practice that we're building there. Obviously, if anyone has any questions on it, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to share the details on that. But I do think, regardless of whether it's through the work that we're doing at Bluewater or anywhere, it's an area that I think a lot of people skip over, is just having an understanding of where things are for your organization today. Not tacit stuff that is just kind of, this is my gut is, to really identify it, to measure it, to have a starting point, and so you can build an informed path forward.
Yeah, that discovery process is really important. And going back to the statement you made about maturity, an organization might be okay with, they don't have to always be at the top end of a maturity model. They could just stay there in that area because they say, hey, this is where we are. We're comfortable here. This is where we're going to continue to grow in just this one area, right? Because there's a lot of growth in a maturity model. Like, most of the ones you see in business, there's like 5 stages, and people are fine with that one stage of just being in the 3rd stage of integration, where the reactive and the structured part, they got that down. They're just integration. They're happy with that. And they just they don't want to be strategic, striving and be the high performing type of company. They just want to continue to make sure that their employees are happy, because they don't want to get employee burnout. They don't want to indulge or how should I say, learn or dump so much learning on their people, where the people are like, oh, this is so much. No, we don't need all of that. And so,
and I also think that part of it, I also think that there's an aspect of it where we judge the maturity wrong sometimes. Like if we're looking at the how mature we are through the quality of our learning content, we're missing the point. The maturity should be based on the contribution that we're making to an organization. I mean, I give you an example of what I mean here, and this gets into the nuances of what's right or wrong. I remember with the first bank that I worked for, I got the prototypical nightmare call of Friday afternoon. Something happened in our legal department. There was this issue, and we needed to cover our butts, and we needed information out that could be verified for people by Monday. It needed to be something that was in people's mailboxes on Monday morning, and they needed to do it by the end of the day, Monday night. And it came to me, and I solved the problem. That, like, I understood what the problem was. I said, okay, we don't have time to do this right. We have time to get this done. And we're going to get this done. And I put together one of the most successful, from the business's perspective, programs that I ever did, because they recognized that it was a challenge. They recognized the criticality of it. They recognized we didn't have time to do it, but we still needed to solve the problem. And we did. And they were thrilled. And it's one of the things that elevated us as a learning, that helped my journey in that organization of going from, I'm here to deliver training courses, to I'm here to solve problems. And I was able to solve the problem. Now, it was on that spectrum, it was tremendous. It was one of the most impactful things for my career at that stage. If I had taken that project and I brought it and I was going to bring it to some sort of an event to showcase it, everyone would be like, "Oh my God, that is the ugliest, worst design thing I have ever seen in my entire life," because it's judged out of context.
Yeah.
And I think that's we need to recognize that. Like, what enabled some of the stuff that I did later in my career in that organization that was higher quality, that was more impactful, that better aligned with how learning should be done as a performance partner. The door to do that later work was opened by that ugly ass course that I did over a weekend that people had to do and click next for 5 minutes to do that. So part of the maturity is recognizing how aligned is the work that you do to solving business problems, as compared to how pretty are your courses and how much do you align with pedagogy and things of that sort. What's your business value? Again, I'll get off my soapbox. I didn't realize I packed it today.
No, love it, love it. I think all the content you're sharing is great. And those of you who are online, if you have questions for David, feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to have some time that David will be able to address some of the questions that you have or burning questions you may have. So Visakh, like we've been talking about community, and here at the Learning Buzz, we've been really trying to do that. And as David was talking about, behaviors, he's talking about culture, he's talking about an organization trying to get to a place where it's not necessarily always about the maturity model, but it's also what problems are we trying to solve for? And then how do we then add learning in there to help bring people along to give them that context, Visakh, what are some of the things I think we see, and we can ask David, right? Like that we're maybe challenged with. Like Apposite does a lot of work with clients, and I think they're seeing a lot, especially in the AI space.
Cassie, I think part of the answer to this lies in what David just mentioned earlier, right? I mean, it's not about the scores, it's not about the completion rates, it's about the contributions, right? I mean, the people, the employees, or if you're talking about communities here, the way communities would grow is if the members would contribute, and that helps everybody else, right? So even for the learning buzz itself, I mean, I guess that's my take. I would love to hear David's take also. With like, how do we kind of, I don't want to use the word motivate, but it needs to be that, that members need to contribute and, put their stories. And David, I love the article you wrote today on LinkedIn about, the stories matter most and, more than the completion rates and such. So that really resonated. And I thought, I mean, what do you think? I mean, besides these contributions from members, anything else that we can help to really build up that community, provided we have that shared vision and purpose. I get that, but yeah.
Sure. So there's two answers that are bouncing around my head in that. One is for the individuals and one is for the organization as it applies to community. So for the individuals, I try to bring visibility to the value that it creates for you as an individual to contribute. Because a lot of people look at it through the lens, there are three primary lenses that I think people look at contributing to a community.
Okay.
And the first two are fairly obvious and a little self-serving, in the sense of like well, not necessarily self-serving, but they're fairly obvious. One is it'll be good for the community if I contribute. Like that's just kind of a feeling. Like it doesn't necessarily serve me, but it adds some context and value to the community to do that. And there may be an altruistic reason for people to do that, but it doesn't necessarily tap into the prototypical "what's in it for me" aspect of it. Like,
I was expecting that to be the first one, the primary one would be self-serving.
There's that, and the other one is the "what's in it for me." So people will contribute if they think that there's self-interest. So if I'm trying to be, I hate the term, but it's valid here. If I want to be seen as a thought leader, if I want to be recognized in some way, shape, or form, I will contribute to the community because it's in my self-interest, because I want that recognition. And those are most people have visibility into that. The piece that I think has greater value that not everyone has as much visibility to is how much contributing helps you learn. Like we tend to look at contributing through the lens of I'm going to contribute so that other people can learn from what I'm contributing. The amount of growth that you can personally get as an individual through contributing is huge. I mean, you mentioned the article that you read this morning. Part of that article, part of the reason that I wrote that article wasn't to contribute it out to the world. A lot of the writing that I do is me just making sense of the world around me. The article that you mentioned today was literally like, this has been a thought that's been bouncing around my head, and I want to try to make some sense of it. I want to try to make it to take this thing that's up here and bring it down to a more practical level.
Yeah.
And so the writing process of doing that, I'm learning through, I'm growing through that. I'm making more sense of the world around me through writing. That's the primary reason that I write.
Could be for others also, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Could be for others also, this reason.
Well, so when I first started writing, yes, when I first started writing, I wrote for me, and to this day, I still write for me for a lot of the writing that I do. I do some intentional content marketing stuff that's got an external focus, but
It's
most
called
of the writing
DK Diaries.
Yeah, I just write for me. And admittedly, when I first started, when blogging was new, again, I'm carbon dating myself. But when I first put my first blog when blogging was new, I just kind of put it out there like, maybe somebody would like this. Didn't necessarily, it wasn't like intentional. I just kind of put it out there to see if people would be interested, and it resonated with people. And what I discovered, and this is why I put things out there as often as I do, is I learn so much when people comment. I learn so much through the feedback and the additional perspectives. I mean, gosh, so many times I've written something because I write something and I don't realize that I have blinders on the perspective that I just wrote about until someone adds a comment that was outside of my field of view. And I learned through that. So part of the contributing to the community aspect that I think that people don't realize is how much personal growth you get out of through the feedback and engagement that people have around what you contribute. That's huge. The other piece that I mentioned, there were two sides of it, is the organizational value side. You know, people look at community through the lens of connection and engagement. And I think that those things are valid. I don't want to minimize those in any way, but connection and engagement aren't business value. They're valuable. And there are probably organizations that see if we have people who feel more connected and they're more engaged, they'll do their work better. But that's an assumed thing as compared to if I said the framing around why an organization might want to invest resources to help a community. That's a capability infrastructure. If you have a strong community where people are sharing, the connection and the engagement is there, and they are sharing. It's not just a feel-good value. You're building capability. That's an infrastructure where capabilities can be increased and valued and bring visibility to capability. It helps knowledge move in an organization. It enables people to solve problems more efficiently. It surfaces emerging practices that you might want to apply across there. It gives the organization an opportunity to learn within itself and grow within itself. And when you put it through the lens of capability, that's a KPI that organizations are focused on right now. Like if you can invest in community and build organizational capability through that, that has very real material value to an organization.
I mean, think about it, right? We have social media like Facebook and Instagram and all over there, and they have these algorithms to really track how people are doing. So much of data is being collected. Imagine an organization having something like that, and the data that they would be able to collect. I know there are a lot of things around ethics, surveillance, so many other things that we have to figure out. But if that were in place, community is a very good place for them to get those signals, right? Of how people are doing, how those cross departmental functional things happen. Yeah.
Well, and you touch on something else that I think is important in the community conversation that I'll hit on really quickly. And it is a practice of how to help build a community. And again, I'm pulling my soapbox out again. There's a curation element to community management and community support that I think is important, because to your point, there's a lot of noise. There is so much noise that's out there. And part of why I think curation is such a powerful element of building a strong community is if you have people in the community that can curate important what matters to the community, to replace all of the noise with some clarity around what's important to the people who are in a shared community. People will engage in that community. It's one of the things that I've always believed. It's been a strong aspect of the work that I've done previously. It's actually the kind of the tenet around what I've launched with Amplified Learning Performance and my Amplified Substack. That's exactly what it's there for. It's to bring visibility to things that people can't find within the noise that have value to our community of industry experts. So I think that's a huge element there of how can you curate within the community to add value to the community.
I'm going to add one more thing, and something we haven't talked about, which is in the communities, there's really big generational differences in how people participate, show up, the behaviors and everything. And I'm curious, like as we're talking about communities, how we in our age group would run a community is very different than how a very younger person coming into the workforce would run a community or want to participate in a community or understand what a community is. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because, Visakh had brought up like, oh yeah, okay, there's the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the LinkedIn, but the TikTok, when TikTok came around, boom. That changed a whole bunch of things, right? Generationally, as well. And the younger generation, some of them love TikTok, some of them don't. That tends to be more for the Gen Zers, not the Gen A'ers, So what are some of your thoughts around that? Like, how do we bridge that gap of generations as we're doing these communities?
So a couple of thoughts. First is I try to be aware of what people are engaging with. Like you mentioned TikTok as an example. There is that is a new type of way to engage with people that there's energy around. There's a level of engagement around it, and I try to add knowledge around that new type of engagement to the portfolio of options that I might consider. And I use those words intentionally because, my mom likes TikTok. She's 84 years old. And if I want, and if the target audience that I wanted to reach was partly my mother's people, like, I would engage in TikTok, and so for me, it's a matter of like, who's in your community? How do they like to engage? And how do we build resources around it that can do that? Regardless of what their age groups are. Now, yeah, I agree that there are some broad strokes that you could do that around generations and such. But I sometimes think that in doing that, we can exclude as much as we include. And so I try to just look at the broader strokes that are around that. I do think that there's an element of purpose attached to it. Like, what are you trying to accomplish with the community?
Think about Reddit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that has a very interesting purpose.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you trying to accomplish as an organization? When you say community, what's your purpose? I mean, because the experiences that you gather to support that community need alignment to that. I mean, an example of it is not immediately coming to mind, but if I had a certain purpose with the community, I don't care what age group the people are in the community, and I don't care how much they engage with TikTok. If that sort of content model doesn't align with the purpose, like, it might be a great way to engage them, but is it also aligned with the purpose that I have here? So I think that's one of the areas that can fail. It kind of because sometimes people will be like, we want to engage the younger people in our audience. They are on TikTok, so if we build a TikTok-like experience, they will come. doesn't work that way.
It does not.
So we need to remember what the purpose is and make sure that the mediums that we're using are not only aligned to the interests that people may already have, but aligned to the purpose and mission that we have attached to the community as well.
Oh,
But
thanks,
thank-
David. I mean, that was super helpful. Visakh, you want to add some closing thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm extremely thankful for that because, as you know, the Learning Bus is a community that we want to kind of, bring in. It has a clear purpose, and we want to kind of help out people within the L&D community go through these current changes, transformations and all, and try and make sense of, how we can do things better. And it's really, really amazing to have you as, part of this community. Like you mentioned, it always helps to have somebody with a lot of credibility and reputation to kind of make sure that, we don't go through the noise. We kind of keep the noise away. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, David, for
Yeah,
being
thanks,
here.
David. This has been a
Yeah.
great conversation. And I think for our audience, if you're looking to figure out how to build your community, you're looking for maturity model, definitely connect up with David Kelly on LinkedIn. And he does do some work at Bluewater. He will do his first 30-minute call for free, I'm hearing. So,
Absolutely.
take advantage of that. That's always worth it. He's has a tons of experience, but we really appreciate you, David, for spending the time with us today. And we look forward to seeing everyone in our next Learning Buzz. Thanks again, David. And thanks, Visakh. We had a great time and have a great day, everyone.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Bye.